"I can't take you any more," hissed the widow, her eyes devoid of any affection as the wind howled, echoing the fear in the heart of the child in the wheelchair. The wheelchair's wheels creaked dangerously at the edge of the abyss. A violent shove, a piercing scream that tore through the air, and the wheelchair with its small occupant plunged into the void. But amidst the horror of the fall, a gigantic figure emerged from the mountain's shadows, and what it did next shocked the world. The gigantic figure that emerged from the mountain's shadows was an imposing buffalo with horns that resembled ancient crowns and a deep, almost human gaze. It had witnessed every instant of the widow's cruelty. The child's scream, the sound of the chair plummeting into the abyss, all had resonated in its wild soul. An ancestral fury, a protective instinct that had pulsed for generations in those lands, ignited in its chest. Its eyes fixed on the woman who now watched the void with icy satisfaction, believing she had rid herself of her burden. For a moment, the widow felt a shiver. The animal's presence was overwhelming, but her mind, clouded by greed, soon urged her to flee. She took a step back, planning to disappear into the vastness of the desolate landscape. However, before she could even fully turn, the buffalo let out a roar that made the earth tremble beneath her feet. It was not a hunting sound, but a bellow of warning, of indignation, of a primordial justice manifesting itself. It advanced, not with the intention of harming, but of blocking, of preventing any escape. Its heavy hooves pounded the ground, raising dust, creating an impassable barrier between the widow and the freedom she so craved. The woman froze, panic replacing satisfaction. She tried to swerve, but the buffalo, with surprising agility for its size, repositioned itself, its eyes fixed on her, a living wall of fur and muscle. It was as if the very spirit of the mountain was confronting her. Her lips trembled, and she felt cold sweat trickle down her forehead. Meanwhile, the buffalo's unusual agitation did not go unnoticed. Shepherds tending their flock in nearby valleys, accustomed to the majestic but usually reserved presence of the animal, noticed the repeated roars and frantic movement near the precipice. Something was wrong. Quickly, they alerted the authorities, describing the strange scene. Rescue teams, accustomed to accidents in those parts, were urgently mobilized. Upon arriving at the scene, the unfolding scenario was surreal. The widow was cornered, visibly terrified, while the buffalo kept her under its relentless watch. But what truly shocked the rescuers was the sight below the precipice. Nestled on a rocky ledge, a few meters from the edge, was the child in the wheelchair. Miraculously, the chair had become snagged on a twisted bush, and somehow the child had been thrown onto the small platform, unharmed, though in shock. And to everyone's surprise, the buffalo seemed to divide its attention, keeping one eye on the widow and the other, with unexpected tenderness, on the child. It was the silent guardian, a living monument to redemption and the unexpected. Innocence had found its most improbable defender, and justice, a path no one could have predicted. The air seemed to vibrate with emotion, a mixture of relief and awe at that miracle. The air indeed vibrated with a peculiar energy, a mixture of relief and awe that spread among the rescuers. The team leader, a man with a sun-weathered face and kind eyes named Jose, signaled to his men. The priority was the child. With careful and well-rehearsed movements, 2 experienced rescuers began to descend the rocky slope, equipped with ropes and special stretchers. With each meter they approached the small platform. Their hearts beat faster. Below, the child, still in shock, watched their approach. Her large, frightened eyes, however, were not fixed on the men, but on the imposing buffalo, which, despite keeping the widow under its watch, turned its head from time to cast a look that seemed protective. There was a silent connection between them, an invisible bridge of trust that had formed in the darkest moments. The child, with a slight tremor on her lips, extended a pale little hand towards the animal, an instinctive gesture seeking comfort. The buffalo, as if understanding, let out a soft snort, a sound that to the child's ears was more reassuring than any words. The rescuers reached the ledge. With calm voices and slow gestures, they tried to approach the child. The buffalo, however, moved slightly, positioning itself between them and the girl, a zealous guardian. Jose, from above, noticed the scene and instructed his men to act with extreme caution. "He is her protector," he whispered into the radio. "Respect his space." It took time, speaking softly, showing empty hands, until the buffalo, after a long and careful scrutiny, seemed to yield, moving away enough to allow them to get close. The widow, still at the top of the precipice, watched everything with a mixture of terror and disbelief. The buffalo, which held her captive, did not seem to intend to physically harm her, but with each movement of the rescuers towards the child, it let out a low growl, a constant reminder of its presence and its silent sentence. The icy satisfaction from before had completely evaporated, replaced by growing panic. She saw the child being carefully wrapped in a thermal blanket, her eyes still fixed on the animal that had saved her. The image of that small being, whom she considered an unbearable burden, now being rescued and protected by a wild creature, was a cruel and relentless mirror of her own wickedness. In the depths of her soul, a small, cold knot of shame began to form, mixed with the overwhelming fear of imminent retribution. What would people say about her? How would she explain what had really happened in that desolate place? Her reputation, her fortune, everything she coveted so fiercely, seemed to crumble before that unbelievable scenario. The buffalo was not just an animal, it was a silent judge, a herald of a primordial justice she never imagined facing. Her eyes, once filled with greed and cruelty, now reflected only the emptiness of her own despair. The child was safe, and the widow, trapped in her own web of cruelty, began to feel the overwhelming weight of the consequences of her actions. The child's rescue was a beacon of hope for everyone, but for the widow, it was the beginning of a long and painful journey of confrontation with her own conscience, guided by the buffalo's unwavering vigilance. With the utmost care, the rescuers lifted the child from the rocky ledge, wrapping her in a soft, warm blanket. Her eyes, once wide with fear, now held a mixture of exhaustion and childlike curiosity, fixed on the buffalo, which, from the top of the precipice, seemed to follow every movement. The girl, with a faint sigh, nestled into the rescuer's lap, feeling the human warmth and security she had so lacked. As she was hoisted back to the top, the first thing she did was look for the animal. The majestic and motionless buffalo kept its gaze on her, a silent promise of protection that the small soul seemed to understand. Jose, the team leader, approached with a gentle smile, his wrinkled face softened by emotion. "You're safe now, little one," he whispered, stroking the girl's hair. She didn't respond, but her fingers lightly squeezed the blanket, a faint sign that she was listening and feeling. A medical team, already prepared, quickly examined her. Miraculously, apart from the shock and some minor abrasions, the child was physically unharmed. Her resilience in the face of such an ordeal was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, even in the youngest. While the girl received first aid, the attention of the rescuers and authorities turned to the widow. She was pale, her lips trembling, and her eyes, once filled with icy cruelty, now reflected deep terror. The buffalo, though no longer directly cornering her, remained at a respectful but visible distance, a constant reminder of its presence and what it had witnessed. It was as if nature itself was there to ensure that the truth came to light. Jose, with his calm but firm voice, approached the widow. "Madam, we need you to come with us," he said, his gentle but unwavering eyes fixed on hers. The woman tried to protest, stammering excuses and denials, but her words were lost in the air, empty and without conviction. the weight of the buffalo's gaze, which seemed to penetrate her soul, and the presence of the rescuers, who had seen her cornered, dismantled any attempt at dissimulation. Her image as a respectable woman, built over years, crumbled at that instant, revealing the fissure of cruelty she had tried so hard to hide. News of the miraculous rescue and the guardian buffalo began to spread rapidly through the valleys and neighboring villages. The story of the animal, which not only prevented the widow's escape, but also watched over the child, touched everyone's hearts. It was a narrative of altruism and justice that transcended human understanding, a reminder that kindness can emerge from the most unexpected sources. For the widow, every look of disapproval, every whisper that reached her ears, was a blow to her already shaken conscience. She felt social isolation forming around her, an invisible but insurmountable barrier. The journey of confronting her own wickedness had indeed begun. There would be no more escaping what she had done. The child, now safe and beginning to recover, was living proof of her cruelty, and the buffalo, an unforgettable symbol of a justice that would not be silenced. The widow was led away from the precipice, her steps heavy, each one an echo of the brutal shove she had given. The sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, but for her, darkness had already arrived, promising a long night filled with regret. The hope that shone in the child's eyes and in the hearts of those who witnessed the miracle was a painful contrast to the emptiness that now inhabited the widow's soul. The widow, her face etched with defeat and her eyes downcast, could barely look up at the men escorting her. Every step, every movement, seemed to drag not only the weight of her body, but also that of a guilt that was beginning to corrode her soul. The cold mountain air no longer invigorated her. Now it seemed to penetrate her bones, bringing with it the chill of shame. She heard the whispers of the rescuers, the words miracle and buffalo, mixing with the sound of her own despair. Her lips, once so firm in her cruel decisions, now trembled uncontrollably, unable to formulate any defense. The image of the buffalo, majestic and implacable, remained etched in her mind, a silent judge who had stripped her of her mask of respectability. As the widow was taken to the local police station, where a confrontation with the truth and the authorities awaited her, the small child in the wheelchair was carefully transported to the nearest hospital. On the way, nestled in a soft blanket on the lap of a gentle nurse, she finally closed her eyes, exhausted but safe. The initial shock began to give way to a deep, restorative sleep. Her small fingers, still clutching the blanket's fabric, seemed to seek the security that human touch offered. At the hospital, a team of doctors and nurses was already waiting for her, ready to provide all necessary care. Thorough examinations revealed that, apart from the fright and some superficial abrasions, the girl was incredibly well. Her inner strength, her ability to withstand such an ordeal, was a silent testament to her innocence and resilience. The story of the miraculous rescue, told by the shepherds and rescuers, spread like wildfire through the small communities of the region. The figure of the buffalo, the unexpected guardian, became a legend in a few hours. People spoke with reverence about the animal, about its righteous fury and its protective tenderness. It was a heartwarming story, a reminder that kindness and justice could manifest in the most surprising ways. Volunteers and neighbors, moved, began to organize to offer support to the child. Baskets of food, clothes, and toys began to arrive at the hospital, a constant flow of affection and solidarity. The girl, who once seemed alone in the world, was now embraced by an entire community, eager to protect her and see her flourish. For the widow, the night at the police station was long and cold. The questions, though calmly formulated, felt like hammers pounding on her conscience. She tried to maintain a facade of innocence, but her words sounded hollow, devoid of any conviction. Her gestures were hesitant, her eyes darted away, unable to sustain the gaze of her interrogators. With each lie, the image of the child on the precipice, of the vigilant buffalo, arose in her mind, a ghost of her own actions. She felt social isolation deepen, the certainty that her reputation was irremediably stained. The greed that had poisoned her now transformed into a poison that consumed her from within, leaving her empty and hopeless. Justice, which she thought she had avoided, was beginning to unfold, not only in the courts, but in the depths of her own tormented soul. The widow, sitting in the cold chair of the interrogation room, felt the weight of every minute. The silence, broken only by the ticking of a distant clock, was deafening. Every question, even the mildest, resonated in her mind like an accusation. She tried to compose herself, to regain the haughtiness that had always characterized her, but the words refused to come out with the same firmness. Her eyes, once so calculating, now darted away, unable to fix on any point, as if searching for an exit that did not exist. The image of the buffalo, with its deep eyes and imposing stature, appeared and reappeared, a constant reminder that there were no witnesses who could be silenced or bought. The mask of respectability she had worn for so many years crumbled, revealing the cruel and desperate woman behind it. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the small child in the wheelchair awoke from a deep and restorative sleep. The soft light of the room welcomed her, and the smell of antiseptic, though strange, was less frightening than the icy air of the precipice. A nurse, with a warm smile and maternal eyes, was by her side. "Good morning, little one," she said, in a gentle voice. The girl blinked, her large, curious eyes scanning the room. She felt her body ache, but a sense of security, long forgotten, enveloped her. In her childlike mind, the image of the buffalo, large and protective, was still vivid, a comforting presence that had accompanied her in her dreams. News of the rescued child and the guardian buffalo continued to spread, touching everyone's hearts. The community's solidarity was palpable. Neighbors who barely knew each other before united in a common purpose, to care for that small soul. Volunteers took turns reading stories to the girl, bringing her small toys and colorful drawings. The child's bed, once empty, was now surrounded by teddy bears and handmade cards, each a symbol of affection and hope. The girl, who at first was shy and withdrawn, began to respond with faint smiles, her eyes shining with a new light. She still didn't speak much, but her gestures, her handshake, her look of gratitude said more than 1,000 words. For the widow, reality imposed itself with a cruelty she never imagined. Evidence accumulated, the testimonies of the shepherds and rescuers were irrefutable. Her fortune, which she coveted so much, now seemed a burden, a cruel irony in the face of her ruined reputation. She found herself isolated, not only by the walls of the police station, but by an invisible barrier of social disapproval. The resentment that had driven her to commit such an act transformed into bitter regret, a poison that consumed her from within, leaving her empty and hopeless. Justice, which she thought she could manipulate, was manifesting itself in ways she never predicted, not only through the law, but through the condemnation of her own conscience and the gaze of society. The nurse, seeing the girl more animated, brought a small mirror. The child looked at herself, and a genuine though weak smile appeared on her lips. She ran her small hand through her hair, a gesture of childlike vanity that filled the nurse's heart with joy. Life, with its incredible capacity for renewal, began to sprout again in that small being. At the same instant, the widow, in her cell, felt the weight of a solitary tear rolling down her face, a sign that perhaps the ice in her heart was beginning to melt, revealing the pain of a lost soul. The solitary tear that rolled down the widow's face was not one of pure regret, but of icy despair. She felt the ground crumble beneath her feet, not just physical freedom, but the reputation carefully built over decades. The image of the buffalo, with its wild dignity, and the child's eyes, so innocent and vulnerable, were cruel mirrors of her own soul. The ice in her heart did not melt from compassion, but cracked under the weight of shame and imminent social condemnation. She hugged her knees, huddled in the cell, feeling a cold that did not come from the environment, but from within herself, a deep emptiness where only greed had once resided. While the widow struggled in her own darkness at the hospital, the small child in the wheelchair began to blossom. The next morning, upon waking, a timid ray of sunshine filtered through the window, painting the room with golden hues. The nurse, Donna Lucia, a woman with white hair and a welcoming smile, was by her side, reading a fairy tale book. The girl, her eyes still a little swollen from sleep, watched the colorful illustrations. She still didn't speak, but her eyes conveyed a renewed curiosity, a sparkle that had seemed extinguished before. Donna Lucia, noticing her interest, pointed to the drawings, describing each character with a sweet and patient voice. The child, in a gesture of trust, extended her small hand and touched the page, a small step towards reconnecting with the world. The community's solidarity, which had spread like a warm embrace, continued to surprise everyone. In addition to toys and clothes, people took turns visiting the girl, bringing flowers picked from the fields and small handmade gifts. One lady, an embroidery expert, brought a sheet with drawings of farm animals, including a majestic buffalo. The child, upon seeing the embroidered buffalo, let out a sigh, her eyes fixed on the image, as if recognizing a distant friend. It was a silent testament to the deep connection that united her to the animal, a bond that transcended words. However, the true turning point for the small soul came from a totally unexpected direction. Days later, while the girl was playing with a teddy bear, the room door opened softly. An elderly woman with silver hair carefully tied in a bun and teary eyes entered. She was not from the region and carried with her the aura of someone who had traveled far. It was Donna Clara, an old and dear friend of the child's mother, who lived in a distant city and had seen the news of the miraculous rescue in a local newspaper. Her heart had tightened upon reading about the child in a wheelchair rescued from a precipice and the mention of the family name. Donna Clara approached the bed, her eyes fixed on the girl, and a gentle smile, laden with pain and affection, lit up her face. "My dear," she whispered, her voice choked. She remembered the little one since birth, the love her parents had for her. Without hesitation, Donna Clara expressed her desire to care for the child, to offer her a home, a grandmother's love that life had denied her. She didn't know about the fortune, nor did she care. Her only wish was to welcome that small soul, to give her the affection and security that had been brutally stolen from her. The nurse, Donna Lucia, watched the scene with teary eyes, feeling that a new chapter, full of hope and true love, was beginning to unfold for the girl, an unexpected gift from life. The nurse, Donna Lucia, watched the scene with teary eyes, feeling that a new chapter of hope and true love was beginning to unfold for the girl, an unexpected gift from life. Donna Clara, her voice thick with emotion, knelt beside the bed, gently extending her hand to the child. "My little one, don't worry anymore. You will have a home, a family. I will take care of you like my granddaughter," she promised, her eyes full of tenderness. The child, who had been cautious, blinked slowly. Her small fingers, previously clutching the teddy bear, timidly reached out to touch Donna Clara's wrinkled hand. There were no words, but the gesture was silent acceptance, a thread of trust. A faint smile, the most genuine the girl had shown, lit up her pale face. Donna Lucia felt a warmth in her chest. That moment proved that, even in adversity, life finds a way for renewal and kindness. News of Donna Clara's arrival and her generous offer spread quickly. The relief was palpable. People, mobilized to help the child, now felt a comforting peace. It was as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders, replaced by the certainty that the girl would have the future she deserved. Visits to the room intensified, with a new sparkle in the visitors' eyes, a mixture of joy and gratitude. Donna Clara, with a dignified demeanor and an open heart, welcomed everyone with affection, sharing stories of the girl's mother, reliving memories that brought tears and smiles. She spoke of the mother's kindness, the father's intelligence, and with each word, the girl seemed to absorb a little more of her roots. The human connection strengthened, weaving a network of support and affection around the little one. While hope blossomed at the hospital, the widow continued her dark journey at the police station. The tear of icy despair had multiplied, and now she cried not only from shame, but from paralyzing fear. Evidence accumulated, testimonies were irrefutable, and the coldness of her actions was exposed. Interrogations became more incisive, and with each unmasked lie, the mask of haughtiness fell. She found herself cornered by the undeniable truth of her actions. The image of the child, whom she considered a nuisance, now haunted her, a constant reminder of her cruelty. The fortune, once so desired, seemed insignificant in the face of the loss of her dignity and the imminent social and legal condemnation. The isolation, previously imposed by the community, now became an internal prison, built by her belated regret. Donna Clara dedicated herself to the girl with inexhaustible patience and love. She talked, sang old songs, and read fairy tales. The girl, responding to so much affection, began to make small sounds, babbling that was music to Donna Clara. One day, while Donna Clara showed her the embroidered buffalo on the sheet, the girl pointed to the image and, with visible effort, murmured a sound resembling boo. It was her first word, recognition of her guardian, an unbreakable link to the miracle that saved her. Donna Clara and Donna Lucia exchanged emotional glances, tears streaming down their faces. That small sound was a beacon of hope, the girl's voice, silenced by trauma, finding its way back. The recovery was not just physical, but of the soul, a true rebirth. Justice, silent and implacable, continued its course for the widow. For the child, love, family, and overcoming opened the doors to a future of infinite possibilities. For the child, love, family, and overcoming opened the doors to a future of infinite possibilities. In the days that followed, the hospital room transformed into a nest of affection and hope. Donna Clara, with her serene presence and gentle hands, was the center of this new universe. She spent hours by the girl's side, reading fairy tales with funny voices, singing forgotten lullabies, and simply being there, a beacon of unconditional affection. The girl, once so withdrawn and silent, began to flourish under this human warmth. Her eyes, which once carried the shadow of trauma and fear, now shone with renewed childlike curiosity, exploring every detail of the room and of those who visited her. The babbling became more frequent, and words, though still few, began to emerge, bringing joy to everyone. She repeated, pointing her little finger at the embroidered sheet, a touching recognition of her animal guardian, the majestic buffalo. Then, with visible effort that filled Donna Clara's heart with pride, came Lou. For Donna Lucia, the nurse who had been her first bridge to safety and comfort. With each small achievement, Donna Clara hugged her tightly, tears of pure joy streaming down her wrinkled face, feeling the miracle unfold. The community continued to be a pillar of support. Visits did not cease, and every gift, every word of encouragement, wove an invisible network of protection around the girl. People spoke of the Buffalo Girl, and the story of her rescue became a modern fairy tale, a vibrant reminder of the goodness that resides in the human heart and the wisdom of nature. Meanwhile, at the police station, the widow faced an increasingly bleak reality. The initial tear of icy despair had turned into a river of bitterness. The nights were long, cold, and populated by vivid nightmares: the precipice, the shove, the buffalo's eyes, and the accusing silence of the child falling into the abyss. She tried to close her eyes tightly, but the images refused to disappear, etched in her mind. Interrogations deepened, and with each new piece of evidence presented, her facade of innocence crumbled. The lawyers she tried to hire were reluctant. The reputation of the cruel widow had already spread, and no one wanted to associate their name with hers. Her gestures, once so controlled and calculating, were now of pure despair. She ran her hands through her hair, pulling it, as if wanting to tear out the guilt and shame that gnawed at her from within. The social isolation she had imposed on the child, treating her as a nuisance, now turned against her with overwhelming force. People who once revered her for her fortune now looked at her with contempt and repulsion, turning their faces when she passed. Greed, which had been her only compass, now led her to a dead end, where her only company was the empty echo of her own actions and the certainty of a dark future. Donna Clara, in turn, her heart overflowing with love, began to organize the girl's move to her home. She had already provided a more comfortable wheelchair and adapted a room with toys, books, and a mural with animal drawings. The house, once silent, would soon be filled with children's laughter and the promise of a bright future. Justice for the widow was a slow but inexorable process. For the girl, however, justice had already arrived, wrapped in the love of a new family and the resilience of a pure spirit. The buffalo, though distant, remained a symbol of her protection, a powerful reminder that life, at times, offers us unexpected guardians and miracles that transform pain into hope. The girl, with a smile for Donna Clara, extended her small hand to the teddy bear, her eyes full of a new light, ready to embrace the new chapter that life offered her. The girl, with a smile for Donna Clara, extended her small hand to the teddy bear, her eyes full of a new light, ready to embrace the new chapter that life offered her. The days at the hospital turned into weeks of anticipation, with Donna Lucia preparing her for the transition. The nurse lovingly explained that she would have a room all her own, full of colors and new toys. The wheelchair, once a symbol of vulnerability, now represented her freedom, allowing her to explore the world around her with Donna Clara's help. Finally, the day of discharge arrived. The hospital, once a refuge, beckoned with the promise of a true home. Donna Clara, radiant, dressed the girl in a new dress, embroidered with small flowers, a gift from the community. Upon leaving the room, a corridor full of smiling faces awaited her. Donna Lucia, doctors, nurses, and volunteers. Everyone waved, some with tears in their eyes, celebrating her recovery. The girl, in her wheelchair, waved back, a wide, genuine smile illuminating her face. She could already say, "Thank you," clearly, a sound that filled the air with emotion and gratitude. Donna Clara's house was a haven of peace. The girl's room was a dream, walls in soft shades of green and yellow, a soft rug, and a mural with drawings of farm animals, including a majestic buffalo. The adapted bed was covered with a fluffy duvet. Donna Clara spent hours showing her storybooks, puzzles, and rag dolls. The girl, who once communicated by gestures, now formed small sentences describing what she saw and felt. "Buffalo friend," she would say, pointing to the mural, and Donna Clara would respond with a tight hug, feeling the warmth of that new love. The community continued to surround Donna Clara and the girl with affection. Neighbors brought warm meals, helped with gardening, and offered companionship. The girl, once isolated by trauma, now received visits from other children who came to play with her in the adapted garden. Their laughter echoed through the house, filling the emptiness. Donna Clara watched everything with a grateful heart, feeling that life had given her a new purpose, a new family that flourished each day. While light and joy filled the girl's life, the darkness of the cell consumed the widow. The legal process advanced. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimonies from shepherds, rescuers, and former employees revealed her cruel character and greed. She tried to defend herself, but her words were empty. Society, once impressed by her fortune, now saw her as the cold, calculating, unscrupulous woman she truly was. Her disheartened lawyers informed her of the inevitability of conviction. The fortune, which she had tried to secure with such a heinous act, would be confiscated and allocated to the girl's custody. This news was a harder blow than the loss of freedom. She found herself stripped of everything she valued, completely alone, without the money she believed to be her only source of power. The mirror in her cell reflected an image she barely recognized, an aged woman with sunken eyes and a face marked by bitterness and deep despair. There was no more haughtiness, only the shadow of a lost soul consumed by despair. The shadow of a lost soul consumed by despair was all that remained of the widow. In her cold cell, the hours dragged on, each second a hammer on her conscience. She incessantly relived the scene at the precipice, no longer with coldness, but with growing terror. The buffalo's eyes, once a mere detail, now haunted her, large and accusing, in every dark corner. The silence of the cell was broken by her muffled sobs, a sound she never imagined producing. The fortune, the engine of her cruelty, was a spectre, a bitter irony that reminded her of everything she had lost. Freedom, wealth, and dignity. She saw herself stripped of respect, pathetic and isolated, her name synonymous with wickedness. The outside world, once a stage for ostentation, now judged her severely. While the widow plunged into her abyss, Donna Clara's house flourished with the life and joy of the girl. The days were filled with laughter, songs, and new discoveries. Donna Clara, with infinite patience and boundless love, dedicated herself entirely to the little one. She took her for walks in the adapted garden, where the girl touched the flowers with curiosity, feeling the texture of the petals and the smell of the earth. The wheelchair, adorned with colorful ribbons and a small bell, was her adventure companion. The girl, once almost mute, now formed simple and meaningful sentences. "Beautiful flowers," she would say, pointing to a bed of daisies, and Donna Clara would smile, her heart overflowing with happiness. Each day, the connection between them deepened. Donna Clara told stories of the girl's mother, describing her kindness and love. The girl listened attentively, her eyes fixed on Donna Clara's gentle expression, absorbing a piece of her past, of her roots. There was no more fear in her eyes, only an insatiable thirst for knowledge and affection. She began to call Donna Clara Grandma Clara, a sound that made the elderly woman's eyes well up with emotion. It was a title of affection and belonging, sealing the bond that life unexpectedly had woven. The community, a silent witness, continued to offer support. Neighbors brought cakes, children's books, and even a small stuffed dog, which the girl hugged affectionately, naming it Little Buffalo. The presence of the stuffed dog brought a new dimension of joy. The girl spent hours stroking its soft fur, talking to it in her childlike language. It was a silent companion, an echo of the guardian, the majestic buffalo, who remained alive in her memory and heart. Donna Clara watched the scene, feeling that destiny had been rewritten for that soul. Justice. For the widow was a legal sentence approaching, but for the girl, justice had already manifested in unconditional love, an unexpected family, and a second chance. The overcoming was not just physical, but of the soul, which opened to life with admirable resilience. In court, prosecutors presented the last evidence against the widow. The disheartened defense lawyer could barely argue. The widow's image, once powerful, was now that of a broken woman, empty eyes reflecting the imminent conviction. She heard the words greed, cruelty, attempted murder echo, each one a nail in her social coffin. The confiscated fortune would be used to secure the girl's future, a final blow that stripped her of her last vestige of power. She clasped her hands, feeling the weight of guilt and the coldness of the marble bench, knowing there was nowhere left to run. Life, in its relentless balance, had found its equilibrium, separating light from darkness, redemption from despair. Life, in its relentless balance, had found its equilibrium, separating light from darkness, redemption from despair. In the courtroom, the silence was almost palpable, heavy as the cold stone of the benches. The widow, seated with hunched shoulders and a pale face, heard the judge's words echo in the room, each one a final blow to her existence. Considering the irrefutable evidence, the compelling testimonies, and the absence of any genuine remorse, this court declares you guilty of attempted murder and abandonment of a helpless person. Your fortune will be confiscated and fully allocated to the custody and well-being of the child. You will be sentenced to the maximum penalty provided by law, with deprivation of liberty for a long period. The judge's voice, though calm, carried the seriousness of justice. The widow did not cry, did not scream. Her eyes, once so full of haughtiness, were now empty, fixed on a distant point, as if her soul had been torn from her body. She clasped her hands, her nails digging into her palm, feeling only the icy cold of defeat. There was no more power, no wealth, no respect. Greed had led her to an abyss, much deeper than the one into which she had tried to throw the girl. While darkness swallowed the widow, light radiated in Donna Clara's house. It was a special day, a small celebratory breakfast organized by the community. The garden, now blooming and adapted, was filled with neighbors, friends, and the hospital nurses, including the beloved Donna Lucia. The girl, in her new wheelchair, adorned with colorful ribbons, was the center of attention. She wore a cheerful dress with butterfly prints, and a genuine smile illuminated her face. Donna Clara, radiant, knelt beside her, holding her small hands. "My dear, today we celebrate your new life, your new home, and our new family," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You are my granddaughter, my gift, and I promise you will never be alone again." The girl, with a sparkle in her eyes, extended her arm to hug Donna Clara, a gesture that sealed the promise. "Grandma Clara," she murmured clearly, and the sound filled the air with an inexpressible sweetness. The stuffed dog, Little Buffalo, was on her lap, and she pointed to the mural on the living room wall, where a majestic buffalo smiled at her. "Buffalo, friend," she said, and Donna Lucia, with teary eyes, nodded, confirming the unbreakable connection. The laughter of the other children playing in the garden was music to Donna Clara's ears, who watched the scene with a heart overflowing with gratitude. The girl, who was once a burden, was now the personification of hope, a living testament that love and kindness always find a way. The widow, now a recluse, felt the weight of her conviction. The cell bars were the materialization of her internal prison, built by years of greed and cruelty. She saw herself stripped of everything, an empty echo of who she once was. The fortune, which had been her compass, was now just a bitter memory, a ghost that haunted her. The isolation she had imposed on the child was now her own reality, with no escape. In Donna Clara's house, the girl, her eyes full of a new light, played with Little Buffalo, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. The future, once uncertain, now unfolded before her, full of love, affection, and infinite possibilities. a true miracle of overcoming and human connection. In Donna Clara's house, the girl, her eyes full of a new light, played with little Buffalo, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. The future, once uncertain, now unfolded before her, full of love, affection, and infinite possibilities. The days transformed into a tapestry of colors and sounds. The girl, once fragile and silent, moved with ease in her adapted wheelchair, exploring every corner of the house and garden. Her babbling gave way to complete sentences, full of curiosity and joy. She asked about the flowers, the birds, the clouds. Donna Clara, sitting beside her, responded with a smile, her eyes welling up with a happiness she never imagined finding again. The connection between them deepened each day. The girl called Donna Clara Grandma Clara sweetly. She told stories of her mother, of her father's kindness, and with each memory the girl seemed to absorb a piece of her own history, of her roots. There was no more fear in her eyes, only an insatiable thirst for knowledge and affection. Little Buffalo, her stuffed dog, was her silent confidant, always by her side, a reminder of the guardian who had saved her. She pointed to the mural in the living room, where the buffalo smiled and said clearly, "Buffalo friend saved the girl." Donna Clara nodded, confirming the miracle, and hugged her granddaughter tightly, feeling life pulse again in her home. The community, united around the girl, continued to celebrate her recovery. Visits were constant, bringing gifts and human warmth. Children's laughter filled the air, transforming Donna Clara's house into a haven of joy. It was living proof that kindness, once sown, blossoms and multiplies, creating unbreakable bonds of solidarity and love. While life flourished for the girl in the cold prison cell, the widow faced the final resolution of her actions. The sentence had been pronounced, the fortune confiscated, and freedom, a luxury she had always taken for granted, was just a distant memory. She spent her days in a heavy silence, broken by her despair. There was no longer the haughtiness of before, only a hunched figure with empty eyes, reflecting the image of a lost soul. The nights were long and populated by vivid nightmares, the precipice, the shove, the buffalo's accusing eyes. She tried to close her eyes, but the images refused to disappear, etched in her mind. Greed, which had consumed her, was now her executioner. She had traded dignity, respect and freedom for a fortune she would never enjoy. The isolation she had imposed on the child, whom she had treated as a nuisance, was now her own reality, with no escape. There were no visits, no words of comfort, only the emptiness of a purposeless existence. Justice, implacable, had stripped bare her cruelty, leaving her with nothing but the weight of belated regret and the certainty that life in its balance had found its equilibrium, separating light from darkness, redemption from despair. The girl, once a victim, was now the personification of hope, a testament that love and kindness always find a way, transforming pain into a promise of the future. The promise of the future, which once seemed a distant dream, now unfolded in vibrant colors in the girl's life. Months turned into years, and Donna Clara's house blossomed with the contagious joy of the little one. The wheelchair, once a symbol of vulnerability, was now her throne of adventures, adorned with stickers of flowers and animals, a reflection of her vibrant and curious personality. She explored the world with insatiable curiosity, her eyes shining as she discovered each new landscape in the garden, each book on Donna Clara's shelf, where she spent hours leafing through illustrated pages. Words, which once came with difficulty, now flowed in long sentences full of imagination, telling stories of heroic buffaloes and enchanted gardens, with a clarity that filled Donna Clara's heart with pride. Donna Clara, with whiter hair and a more tender smile, saw in the girl the renewal of her own soul, a purpose that life had denied her for so long. Each laugh from her granddaughter was a balm, each tight hug a confirmation that life, no matter how many challenges and losses it brought, always offered the chance to start over and to love again. She taught the girl about the plants in the garden, about the stars in the sky, and about the importance of being kind and courageous, values that the little one absorbed with precocious wisdom. The girl, in turn, taught Donna Clara to see the world with new eyes, to find beauty in small things, and to value every moment of peace and joy. The bond between them, forged in adversity and nurtured by unconditional love, was unbreakable, a beacon of hope and resilience for all who knew them. Little Buffalo, the stuffed dog, a little worn by time and hugs, still rested affectionately on her bed, an amulet that connected her to the past and to the miracle that had changed her life. The mural in the living room, with the majestic and vigilant buffalo, was a point of daily contemplation, a silent altar to nature's courage and the unexpected protection she had received. The young woman now understood the depth of that event, not as a trauma, but as the turning point that led her to a life of purpose, love, and immense gratitude. Donna Clara, sitting beside her, held her wrinkled hand with affection, and the young woman, her eyes fixed on the image of the buffalo, said with a serene voice full of emotion, "He saved me, Grandma Clara, so I could live all this, so I could love and be loved." While the young woman's life unfolded in fullness and meaning, the widow remained in her prison, a dark and desolate spectre of herself, consumed by the consequences of her actions. The years of incarceration had not softened her soul, but had left her even more isolated in her own despair and belated regret, an internal prison crueler than bars. The cold walls of the cell were her universe, and the heavy silence, her constant and merciless companion. She incessantly relived the moments of her cruelty, no longer with the initial despair, but with a painful clarity of the futility of her greed and the wickedness that had dominated her. The fortune which had motivated her to commit such a heinous act was now a distant and useless memory, a burden that had condemned her to a life without light. Her eyes, once empty of emotion, now carried the overwhelming weight of a self-imposed solitude, a punishment that no legal sentence could equal in its cruelty. There was nowhere left to run, nor to hide from the truth of herself. The story of the young woman and the buffalo, told and retold from generation to generation, transcended the farm's borders, becoming a hymn to the unbreakable resilience of the human spirit and the unwavering strength of unconditional love. It was a powerful reminder that true wealth does not reside in material possessions or ephemeral goods, but rather in the deep bonds we build, in the genuine kindness we offer to others, and in the extraordinary ability to transform the deepest adversity into a springboard for a brighter and more meaningful future. The young woman, with her full, inspiring and purposeful life, was living proof that, even after the darkest and longest of nights, the sun always shines again, bringing with it the promise of a new dawn, full of hope, human connection, and a renewed purpose that illuminates everyone.